board and turn it over to Lynn Williams to introduce our speaker. Have fun.
Good morning. My name is Lynn Williams, and I'm a member of the Fine Arts Committee. And this morning we have for you a very fine artist. Joel Schoontanis is a graduate of Hope College, and for the past 30 years, he has been a working artist. He's written and illustrated a handful of books. He is also a prolific painter who describes in his own words, he has done gazillions of paintings. He has created murals that are around the world in places like Kenya, Zambia, and the Separation Wall in Palestine. In 2016, one of Joel's paintings was presented to the Pope. In 2017, he joined international artists in Leipzig, Germany, to create art around themes of social justice in conjunction with the gathering for the 500th anniversary of the Reformation. I was privileged to hear Joel present a few years ago, a year in the life of an artist. It was interesting and thought-provoking, as I'm sure today's presentation will be, on art as communication and as our environmental activism. There we go. Please join me in welcoming Joel Schoontanis.
Well, good morning, and welcome to my studio. While I wish I was with you in person, it is sort of fun that I can bring you right into my studio. This is where I work, down the block from probably some of you. I'm on 10th Street, across from Centennial Park, in the big brick building next to the Holland Museum. I'm super happy to be with you. You know, I have done several HASP talks over the years, and at this rate, based on the color of my beard, I will be a member the next time I speak with you. I'm on my way, I'm getting close. You know, when I said yes to this presentation, I had just begun on an art project with a theme focused on biodiversity. And my intention for this presentation was to share a whole bunch of art from that. But you know, it's 2020. And after I said yes, I had to cancel a show, an art show I've been working on for about 9 months. And that show will now be next summer. But the way the art world works is I needed that show to help fund this biodiversity show. And so I have been making progress on the show, but much more slowly because of, well, 2020. Sort of an asterisk with everything this year, isn't there? So that doesn't change my topic, however. We are going to be talking about art as environmental activism, but here's what we're going to do. I'm going to start out sort of laying some groundwork, and we'll just chat here about just my musings on the role of the artist in society and what the role of art is. Then we'll talk very briefly about the idea of art as activism and quickly move then into art as environmental activism. And in that section, I'm going to share examples of, I just chose 3 artists that I like. There are many more that we could choose. I can point you in some of those directions, but I'll show you just 3 very different artists who I think are accomplishing the task. And finally, I will share with you a little progress on my biodiversity show and how the show continues to grow and get more complicated, but also I think more interesting. So that's where we're going. Let's start out with, I'd like to throw at you a few ways of thinking about art, and let's see what sticks. I've got sort of 3 ideas. I'd like your sort of 3 threads of thinking about the role of art or of artist. The first one is this. I'd like to move the idea of art from lone genius to improviser. These are not my own thoughts. I am drawing heavily from a book called Liturgy as a Way of Life by Bruce Ellis Benson. Bruce Ellis Benson is a philosophy professor at Wheaton College. He's also a jazz musician. And I've read this book now a couple of times, and it's been helpful to me. This is a book that really looks at art in the church, but his philosophical ideas apply to art in general to me, because it helps for me to frame some ways I had been conditioned and even indoctrinated in thinking about art in my sort of modernist upbringing, in my modernist training, and how some of those things I think are not helpful. They're not actually can be hurtful. And they certainly don't work with my working philosophy today as to why I would make art and what art is for. So Bruce Ellis Benson takes us back to Immanuel Kant. So look at, I'm going for the heavy hitters right away here with Kant. And he talks out in Kant's Critique of the Power of Judgment, that's in 1790, he talks about the genius. He says, the genius is a favorite of nature, the likes of which one has to regard as only a rare phenomenon. But what is genius is the question. Kant tells us that genius is a talent for producing that for which no determinate rule can be given. Consequently, originality must be its primary characteristic. Okay, so then Ellis Benson takes us through this whole series of philosophers and artists of wide variety, including a lot of composers and authors who lean into this idea of artist as genius and that it must be entirely original. Okay, that moves us on to this idea in sort of the modern era that an artist must be this lone genius. And this is what Ellis Benson says. Seeing the artist as genius has consequences and quite problematic ones. First, the genius myth has promoted the idea of the artist as a sort of lone creator who neither needs nor wants the influence of or interaction with others. The artist off alone in a garret. Augusto Boal speaks of the solitary author locked in his study to whom divine inspiration dictated a finished text. And it goes on and talks about Bach and other composers and Matisse and all of these artists that sort of bought into this idea that they are these lone creators somehow locked away in genius and working out their genius of complete originality. But for me and for Ellis Benson, as I survey artists over the years, and certainly in the modern era, what we really see is artists borrow from each other. There's a favorite band of mine, a band called U2, maybe you've heard of them, and the lead singer is Bono. And in one of his songs, he says, every artist is a cannibal, every poet is a thief. And I tend to believe that we borrow from each other. What Ellis Benson then moves us to is a paradigm as artist as improviser. And I like this. If you know anything about jazz music, this is especially helpful.
Joel,
yes?
I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm wondering, are you intending to be showing your PowerPoint right now?
I am not. I'll be
Okay, I just wanted to make sure because we had practiced that earlier and I wanted to make sure that I didn't leave you hanging.
You did not.
And, continue.
Thanks. Susan's taking good care of me. I told Susan on the front side that technology scares me. Can you guys all see me again and hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, great. Okay, so Ellis Benson moves us to a model of artist as improviser. So I'll paraphrase what he says. So if you hear jazz music, it might sound like this crazy random stuff even. But what I've learned about jazz music is there's a couple of things going on. Is one, jazz musicians really need to know their technique. So they build on technique and mastery of discipline. That's part of what an artist does. But what they also build on is tradition. They build on past musicians. And so really good jazz musicians, when they do their improv moments, they're doing nods to prior artists. They build and grow and change what is there. And so this shifts the idea of an artist being alone, creating out of nothing, to being an artist in a community with history and to draw from, with community around them to draw from, and building on materials that are present in that. And then they improvise within those materials and come out with something new, but not fully unique and not alone genius. Okay, so there's my huge philosophical idea of what an artist might be. And in that, what I think is important, the part I want to draw out is artists are not meant to be isolated in their studio, except during COVID. But they are meant to be in the community, working with the community, collaborating. Idea number one. I got two other quick ones. Idea number two is my own thought, and I consider creativity a dot to dot, but not your standard dot to dot where you go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5. It's a dot to dot where you're not actually sure what the different dots are, how they're numbered. Here's how let me play this out a little bit more. When I work on a project, I get all the available data, all the things I need to think about that project. So it might be simple things like what materials we're going to use, but it's also what sort of themes are we going to pursue for where I hope this piece of artwork lands. So I'm collaborating with others. Let me give you a current example. I'm grabbing my sketchbook. I'm working on a series of paintings for a research clinic and a research lab and clinic for the Children's Hospital in Charlotte, North Carolina. It's for pediatric oncology. And they're doing these cutting edge things. And so I met with the researchers, the people running the place, and I collaborated with them to gain, insight into what they're doing. So, and I came away with these sort of core things, ideas that are running through what they're doing there. And so let me see if we can see this. So in painting number one, this is just a sketch. You'll see here are people, there's a guy, people from the clinic handing a star to these other folks. I have star imagery moving through a whole series of paintings because one of the things they told me was they're in the business of giving hope to people. And so there's these symbols of hope, in this case, a star going throughout. Another thing they told me is they view people as individuals, not numbers. And so this is a little harder to see, but as the people arrive at this facility, their numbers with these billows are being blown away and dissolving into the ether. And because often in research situations, especially in these trial situations, it's too easy to refer to people as numbers, and they're not. They're human beings and individuals. And so I took ideas like that. I could go through some other ones, but I won't because it's not environmental activism. But where I connect the dots of all this different data and create images, but I'm not connecting them on my own. I'm collaborating with others. So finally, the last idea I want to talk about before we move to a little show and tell and put this into practice is I really think that art is communication. That is that we read art is the way I like to say about this. And I may have spoken last time I was at a HASP, I may have talked about this. This is a main theme I think about. When we go back to Kant and the sort of modern era, a lot of them spoke about art is purely for aesthetics. That is, it actually doesn't have a purpose other than to look nice. I disagree with that. I think that can be a purpose of it. But I believe that art is created to communicate. And that's why I make art. I have a desire to communicate ideas. Communication requires someone to receive, and dialogue needs to begin. And so again, art needs to be in and for the community, in my estimation. At its best, that means art can be prophetic, that is truth-telling, that art can speak truth into a situation. And that's getting a little ahead of myself now, because you can see how that can lead to activism. At its worst, of course, it can be propaganda or harmful communication. But I hope to avoid that. So those are some foundational ideas I wanted to begin with as we think about art, but the core of which is that I believe art's meant for the community, and it's meant to communicate. I'm going to now, I want to get to this idea of communication though, before we get to activism. And I'm just going to do some show and tell of some of my work. A couple are older, so you may have seen them before. Some are fairly recent, and you likely will not have seen them. So let me share my screen with you. All right. We can all see this okay, I assume?
Yep.
So here we go. So we just talked about the role of the artist. That's me looking really artsy. And the core idea was artist communication for and with the community. So let's communicate. Let's look at some of these images. I'm going to ease you in with a couple just whimsical things. Here's a painting I often start things with. So some of you may have seen this before if you've heard me present, but this also is a good example of my work, which I like to juxtapose kids' imagery with realistic imagery. This is a sophisticated group, of course, so I know that juxtaposing is taking things that maybe don't normally sit together and putting them together and seeing what comes out of it. It's also a really good word if you ever want to sound clever at an art event. Just throw the word juxtapose in, and people will think you know what you're talking about. Anyway, in this case, you can see the kid-like imagery in the background and the more realistic in the foreground. And when I talk about reading art, it might be as simple as looking at the tree, see a tree and say, I see a tree. You have just read tree. But then more deeply, what is this story? In fact, Susan, let's actually do a little bit of interaction. I'm wondering if anyone would like to unmute themselves and tell me what they're reading here. What do they think is going on in this image?
I think maybe the bears were looking at what's happening to their home.
Yes.
Because people are building homes.
So the bears are looking to their home. There happen to be 3 bears there. Does that help anyone get the story a little further along?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Hi, Jane.
Yeah.
I think Goldilocks is being arrested.
Yes. You got it. So this is my version of Goldilocks and the 3 bears. Think about it. Breaking and entering, theft, destruction of property. The core idea is just because you're cute and blonde should not mean you're above the law. All right. How about this? I'm enjoying this. I love HASP classes because I know you're interactive. So let's just keep the interaction going. Does anyone?
Joel, before you leave that last slide,
Oh yeah.
there are actually 4 bears because police are often referred to as bears.
Stop it. I never knew that. I'm going to work that into my next presentation. Thank you.
Like Smokey the Bear.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at, and I don't mean Smokey the Bear like the U.S. Forest Service, but
Yeah.
if you go back to television, Smokey the Bear, Smokey the Bandit, whatever. So bears are police or troopers.
Interesting. Thank you for that. All right. Who would like to weigh in on what they think is being communicated, what is being said in this image? First of all, let's just go for the basics. What's this based on? What are they trying to do?
The cow jumping over the moon.
That's right. The cow is trying to jump over the moon. Does anyone want to, let's test everyone's creativity here. If this was a cheesy poster with a inspirational cheesy phrase on it. Does anyone want to provide a good inspirational corny phrase for us?
Need more chicken?
Eat more chicken, nice. Teamwork makes the dream work. Reach for the moon. Okay, we'll move on. Again, here's one more just sort of whimsical example. This is a piece of my art prize. I did a number series a couple of years ago, and it's a lot of wordplay. So I'm wondering if different people would like to jump on and say, what's the wordplay being communicated? What are some pieces of it? There's a lot of things rammed in here.
The birds are toucans.
That's right.
Yeah.
So two can play at that game. Two can. So there are two cans. What else do we see?
There are 2 cans in the picture.
There are two cans, and those are Guinness cans. Does anyone know why I would have them be Guinness cans? Okay, when you get out of COVID, when we get out of the pandemic and can go back to the Curragh, look around the Curragh, and in the 1930s and 40s, Guinness beer, all of their ads were, well, a lot of their ads were these two cans balancing pints of Guinness on their beaks.
Oh yeah.
That's a pretty subtle one, but that's a nod to that's improvisation right there, right? I'm drawing on past imagery, and very few people get that one, but the people that get it, it's really fun. What else do you see?
There are lots of there are pear trees and
They're in a pear tree, right?
He's
There's two
dropping
more.
cards. He's dropping his ace.
He's right. It's actually a deuce.
A deuce.
Oh, it's a deuce. Okay, he's
Drop the
dropping
deuce.
that. Yeah, I can't
So
use
it's
that.
also middle school humor. And I'll give you the last one. The one's wearing a
tutu.
wearing a tutu. Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Now let's move on to the idea of communication with purpose. So that, I mean, the purpose of those last ones were just to be whimsical largely. And the purpose might be as simple as these were paintings I did for an orthodontist. So they're the before and after of the animals. And I have a whole series of them that I did for them. You can tell. See my nice smile? I bartered for orthodontia in the last couple of years, which is one of the bonuses of being an artist. So communication with purpose. This is a painting I did for the company Works Cited in town here. And this is actually for their East Side. And I took the core vision values of the company and put them into images for them. And I'll quickly show them to you. They talk in their service, they want to behave as superheroes. They want to be, instead of being team players, they want to be all part of putting the puzzle together. They want to be innovators. And the final one, and this is their imagery and not mine, just to be clear, even though I think it's hilarious, is they want you to take responsibility for your own mess. And they suggested this idea of clean up after your dog. And which I like, the thing I like about that is when you think about it, when should you clean up? When should you take responsibility for a mess you've made, or especially in an interpersonal situation, you should take care of it right away. Because otherwise those things can hang around and keep smelling, or other people can walk into them and it can grow from there. So that's their imagery. But again, communication with purpose. Now let's move into the final ones. I just want to show you a few that I think the communication can be with deeper purpose. I'm going to share a couple images I did for the Big Read. Have you all participated in the Big Read? I hope you know what it is. Every year for the last number of years, community reads a novel together. And I, other than this year, I've always gone into high schools and worked with students to create artwork around themes from the book. Last year, they did the book In the Time of the Butterflies about these sisters in the Dominican Republic who were instrumental in sort of the revolution down there. And I had students brainstorm things that made up symbols that might make up who that sister was, things that symbolize them, and also find quotes for me, which they wrote out and I collaged into the larger image just to communicate sort of themes that ran through each sister's life. And then a couple years prior to that, we read a book that all of a sudden is slipping my mind about immigrants from Haiti. And so we were exploring ideas of what it means to be an immigrant. Brother, I'm Dying, sorry, is the name of the book, Brother, I'm Dying. And I had students both come up with the images they wanted to their idea of immigration. In this case, it was climbing out of sort of a fog towards hope, but then also sort of things that might, images that might be connected to immigration. And they created little paintings that I collaged in. So you can see here is a gamble, or it might be seen as a life preserver. It might be a key. We're not saying that's what it actually is, but this is what they're hoping it is. So, so we explored themes from the book that way, with the greater purpose of communicating those themes. And then the final series, here's the painting that in the introduction we talked about. I went to Leipzig, Germany during the 500th anniversary of the Reformation and worked with artists from all over the world on themes of justice. And some of the imagery in here are nods to the other works being done there. But this is a church where a lot of the planning was done in Leipzig, which was in East Germany, for taking down the wall. It was peaceful planning of how do we take down that wall. And then this peace pole was erected in that square. And then I added my own peace pole, which is the peaceful kingdom from Isaiah in the Bible, and which is all these animals from that vision, but I stack them on top of each other because it feels sort of sometimes peace feels impossible, and yet here they are, predators and prey coming together, working together to form their own peace pole. So that's that communication. Now the final ones I want to share with you is I recently did a series of paintings for Western Seminary's new Learning Center, and with 4 themes of sort of core things that they explore at Western. And I wanted to bring this one in because this is a good example of both communication, but also the art in community and collaboration. So I met with multiple people at Western to pick their brains. And in the end, we came up with the story of Jonah we were going to pursue, and the story of the prodigal son. And then these themes, and this is a theme of spiritual discipline, and there's scripture and prayer and study. And these are meditative moments for Jonah and a meditative moment for the prodigal son. I could spend more time on these, but again, I want to get on to our activism part. But just show you how, and this is on mission. You can see Jonah in the back doing his, finally giving into his mission. The church and then worship were the themes, but these different elements flow through them all, and they're meant to communicate these things. So as people meditate on them in the Learning Center, they might help them think about what they're doing in that seminary in the first place. And so again, art as communication and with purpose. Okay, this would be sort of the first spot before I move on to the activism portion of our discussion. Does anybody have any questions, comments, etc. at this point before we move into into our next phase?
I don't see anything in the chat, so if somebody has a question or comment, just be sure to unmute yourself.
All right. I'm going to take that as I must be a really clear presenter, or that you want to get on to the next step. Okay. Okay. So let's go on to the idea of art as activism. Sometimes what we create as artists falls into categories that are not necessarily easy to talk about. They might be controversial. It might be hard. You pick the word. And somewhere in that realm is when I think art can start to creep over into the idea of activism. Often this artwork, I think, needs to be, by nature, is public. Yeah, it's public. Here's where I have seen it helpful, and the benefit of it in my own work. What art allows is for difficult topics to be spoken about, but funneled through that piece of artwork. And so it can take some of the personal out of it. And the discussion can be much more civil. Here's my example. Excuse me. This is a painting I did on the separation wall in Bethlehem. So I see that the Aaron's horse around here. So we've got some experts in sort of peace discussions on the talk here. But here's the thing about talking about Middle Eastern politics. I find that a lot of people already have some pretty strong opinions about it, and it can get sort of funny really fast, and those conversations can go sideways. But what I have found in talking about this painting, I've had all kinds of productive conversations with people. So if you don't know, there is a wall that looks like a maximum security prison built around the West Bank. And I'm in the camp that finds that problematic for a lot of reasons. I think it's not going to end well for anybody. But in painting this painting, it's allowed me to have that discussion with folks, but also it's allowed me to introduce the idea that there's a wall that looks like a maximum security prison going around the West Bank. And it's been surprising to me how many people I've encountered that didn't know that. And so this is, again, my Peaceful Kingdom. I call it Balancing the Peaceful Kingdom tower. And I think why it's been a good entry into a discussion about the region is because it actually is a vision of what we would all hope for, right? Of cooperation. So here you have predators and prey, again, working together to form this tower. Now it could be interpreted as they're trying to get over the wall. You can see the wolf howling at the top. He's not happy. But it's been a very interesting launching pad for me to have this discussion about that difficult part of the world. And what's been especially interesting is this painting has ended up appearing in a article for National Geographic Travel on the art on the wall, because I'm one of many artists who have painted there. And it ended up, there's a talk show person, Conan O'Brien, that you may or may not be familiar with. And he did a series that you can see on Netflix where he travels the world and he visits different places. And one of his episodes is on Israel and Palestine. And when he goes to Bethlehem, he stands in front of my painting for probably 10 minutes in his episode and has an encounter with people. And when that episode first aired, I got all kinds of messages from people. It's like, hey, Joel, you're on Conan O'Brien. I had no idea what they were talking about. But it's been interesting. The public platform of painting in a situation like this has allowed this painting to be seen by, I can't even imagine how many people, and has allowed for lots of good discussions on what can be seen as a difficult topic. Of course, the artist that most gets credited for this sort of work and who I love is Banksy. This is a Banksy painting in Bethlehem, in Beit Suhur specifically. which is Shepherd's Field. And every other year, for the last several years, I've been leading an arts camp at a Christian high school in Beit Sahur. And right around the corner from that art camp, just a couple blocks away, is this painting by Banksy in this sort of classic pose of a person who would be throwing rocks or a Molotov cocktail, and instead is throwing flowers. And again, I think he and I are thinking similarly, that it's like, can't we do things differently here? I could give a whole talk on Banksy and activism. If you're not familiar with Banksy, I would point you to a brand new documentary that you can see on Amazon Prime about Banksy. It's fantastic. Or help yourself, there's all kinds of books about Banksy or websites. He is best known for these sort of stencil paintings that he does. And a lot of street artists do stencils because they can get in and get out quickly without getting arrested. But Banksy, if you don't know, we don't know who he is, but he's a British artist, we know that much, who does this sort of underground work, and he loves sort of taking on the powers that be, whether they're governments or corporations, and has been a street artist for a long time now, and actually now is also a very successful artist. You may remember him from last year, the stunt he pulled. One of his prints was being auctioned at Sotheby's or Christie's, one of those.
Yeah.
And he was in a frame that Banksy had built. And Banksy, again, loves to take on institutions, including big auction houses. And as soon as the bid closed on the painting, from a remote place, Banksy triggered a paper shredder in the frame, and the print shredded as it went down. And it's now worth even more money, of course. But so Google Banksy, do yourself a favor, and he's very interesting, or watch the documentary on Amazon Prime. There's a number of documentaries about him, but I found this most recent one the best that I've seen and the most accurate, because they do a lot more interviewing of people who actually know him and have worked with him or work with him, because he does have a small group of people. So Banksy, and Banksy's going to be our bridge into environmental activism now. He's done some of it. It's not his number one topic, but here's a painting. Sometimes he just does graffiti. I don't believe in global warming in this place where the water is rising. I think it's pretty clever. Is it art? We can have that discussion, but I will call it art, and it's certainly activism. A few years ago, the World Economic Forum had a big conference about climate change. And this was something they said about art and climate change. Art does not show people what to do, yet engaging with a good work of art can connect you to your senses, body, and mind. It can make the world felt. And this felt feeling may spur thinking, engagement, and even action. So I really like this because sometimes on a big topic like climate change or in biodiversity, which is what I've been thinking about, which climate change affects, it can feel overwhelming, can't it? And since I'm not a scientist and I lack some expertise, I sometimes don't know what my contribution can be to the problem. But so I think we're all called on the big topics to do things that we can, where our areas of expertise are. So as an artist, I want to use my artwork to get people to think about things that are important and maybe spur them on to engagement and action. But I think it puts art also in its place, that it can communicate, and then from there, it's what people do with that communication. It's just a piece of the puzzle. Again, it's all about community. So I want to show, I'm just going to share a few artists who I think are doing who are doing interesting work. There are a host of artists I could have chosen. I'm going to show you quick bad screenshots of their work, and then I'm going to flip over to websites so I can show you better their work. Oh, actually, sorry, I've got one of mine first. This is what led me into this topic in the first place. Year and a half ago, maybe 2 years, I did a little project at the Holland Area Arts Council on behalf of a group of churches who were working on a topic of creation care. And this was a collaborative collage I did with families. I'm wondering if anyone, what this says to anybody, or if they can tell what was going on there. And maybe some of you I know have seen the piece of work up in person because it's traveled around a little bit, but what's going on here? I'll invite you to unmute yourself and just say what you see. Again, we're reading art, so you can just say what you see.
The death of the coral, the barrier reef, the beautiful coral, it's all being polluted.
Yeah.
That's all those things are made from trash.
They're all made from trash. Yeah. So there are all these horrible studies out these days of what especially one-use plastic items are doing to our water systems. And then the microplastics and all that, it's devastating. And so we had different people sort of collect pieces of plastic over a course of some time, and we had big bags of garbage that people could draw from. And I had outlined sort of a coral reef, and people then collage their garbage on, and I painted over it. But that whole reef, even though there's paint over it, is all made up of wrappers and whatnot. You know, I've used this image, especially when talking with young people, because they understand it, I think, pretty well. And I love to talk about the subway piece of coral. Because here's the thing. If you ever go to a Subway and you get your sandwich, and you're gonna, especially if you're gonna eat the sandwich there, but honestly, even if you're gonna take it with you, they've already wrapped it in a piece of paper. And then they slide it into a one-use piece of plastic that you use to carry 6 feet to go sit into your booth. You eat your sandwich and then throw that piece of plastic away. What's more obviously just ridiculous than that? And you don't have to have the piece of plastic. You can kindly ask them to, please don't put my sandwich in that plastic. You know, so we could go on and on about these kinds of things, but it's been this nice launching pad for in these situations, for especially with me with high school kids, to say, all right, let's think about our habits. And it needs to not just be individual. We need to do some large sweeping corporate things as well, and federal things as well, in my opinion. But individual choices matter too. And let's stop using Subway plastic bags is the point. So that was my bridge into this. There's a close up of it where you can maybe see a little bit more. All the little lollipop wrappers and just so many things. Okay, now here's some artists we're gonna look at. We're gonna look at a woman who goes by the name Marina Debris, obviously not a real name, that's her working name. And she calls herself a Trashion artist instead of fashion artist. And I'll go to her website in just a minute so you can, with a better image. We're talking about Jeff Hong, who's an animation artist who used to work for Disney, and Zaria Forman. So those are the three artists we're gonna look at. I will add that there are a host of National Geographic photographers we could have chosen here. I don't know if any of you are Instagram people, but it's the one form of social media I feel happy and comfortable because you can just follow things like nature and art. So, and it's just pictures. it doesn't get ugly like some of the other forms that social media do, at least in my world. And I follow a lot of artists, and I follow a lot of photographers who are nature people doing really good work that often document the destruction that's coming from climate change and whatnot. There's one photographer who's for 10 years now almost has been documenting animals that are nearly extinct, often which are left only in captivity. They're down to their final few animals, and he's sort of creating a giant Noah's Ark of an archive. So I could have done a whole lot of photographers, but I'll leave that to you to search if you're ever interested, and if you're ever, especially in Instagram, just start following National Geographic things, and you'll find all kinds of great stuff. But I'm going to stop my share here. Okay, this is me talking out loud about technology of my PowerPoint. Hello, and I'm going to now share some websites. Okay, we're going to start with I think we're going to go reverse order of what. Actually, I don't want to do that.
Good job.
I'm going to start here. Can you guys all see that okay?
Yep.
Okay, so this is Marina Debris, obviously a fake name. She works out of Australia. Let me show you 3 examples of her work. First, let's start with her Trashion work. So instead of fashion, it's Trashion. For here's a model. Can you see that? She's made a mermaid costume out of garbage and gotten a model, obviously, and posed it. But she makes all of her art from stuff found on the beach. So this image is called "The Ones That Got Away." This is called ball gown, right? I love that wordplay. All these balls and brackets were found on the beach. We find, again, so she does these sort of things that look like the sort of avant-garde things you see in Fashion Week in New York or Paris. It's called a captive audience. And it's made out of nets, right? Isn't that clever?
Yeah.
So then she does her 2D work is maybe a little more, in my opinion, just knock you over the head. Maybe a little less artsy, but gets the point across. Souvenir of Los Angeles. So she takes photographs and then sorry, out of service. It's called a public service announcement. This is photo taken exactly as it was found. So, I mean, the one thing she's doing here, she's noticing for us these terrible things, right? Let's go shopping. Good. Aquarium of the Pacific. All objects in the aquarium were found washed up on the beach. Look at that. Let me show you her 3D things. So she has a store it's the inconvenience store. All the items inside the store were found washed up on the beach. Look at that. Aquarium of the Pacific Gyre, maybe someone knows, Gyre, sculpture by the sea. All objects in the tank were found washed up on the beach. So she creates these storm brewing, used coffee cup lids collected in 1 month from one building. Isn't that good?
Lids. Oh.
Tomra logo, all single-use bottles and cans received from my Tomra Australia return and earn machines. not so merry-go-round. All the objects on the horse were found washed up or left on beaches. The horse was found on the street. So I just think ozone awards made out of found materials for the Montreal Protocol 30th anniversary. Anyway, so that's Marina Debris.
Great.
I'd welcome you to check her out. The website is actually called washedup.us. So it's her LA-based website. So she works between Australia and Los Angeles. Washedup.us. Okay, now this is Jeff Hong, who used to work for Disney. This is not his website. This is what's called a Tumblr page. And he takes classic Disney characters and sets them into the current situation. So here says even Elsa couldn't save the polar ice caps from melting. So there's Elsa from the Frozen movies. Let me move on. He does all kinds of social commentary. There we see Bambi up there. Want to find there's the one I want to show you. So here's a little mermaid covered in an oil slick. So these aren't my favorite, but I just find it interesting that he's taking his art form, and it's pretty easy to take a character and from a Disney movie and set them into a different situation with horrible concerns. And you know, some of the social ones, I think this is pretty good. The Pocahontas with the casino and just commenting on where we have pushed our Native Americans over the years. Anyway, so that's a second one. And here's the third person I'd like to share. Zaria Forman. So she is amazing to me. These are super large scale works, as you can see. That's her working. These are done in pastels. They look like photorealism, and to me, and then they're not. And then you find out that they're not a painting, which I know some painters that paint hyper realistically. She's doing this with pastels. They blow my mind. And she's cataloging ice, and so she goes and photographs destruction of the different ice caps and glaciers, and then she creates these large scale pieces to draw attention to them. Here's the series that I really like, are her NASA series. Switch over. Oh, it didn't go to where I wanted. Hold on. Oh, here we go. Drawings, NASA. Yeah. So look at, so there are these photos she got. The photos I think she got from NASA, and then she's recreating them. That's a drawing. That's pastel on paper.
Oh,
Isn't it crazy? I normally go for more folksy art or abstract, but this realism she's doing. That's an ice shelf in Antarctica. She's done a lot of work in Greenland and the things melting there. Can you imagine? A superglacial lake in Greenland again. So some of them are more obvious than others, the destruction sort of going on, but then she'll also do these series that shows how the glaciers are melting over time. And I think, to me, the reason that they're so effective is partly because of just the mastery of her skill, combined then with this scale, and it draws you in for that sort of aesthetic piece of it and the skills piece of it. And then to me, my mind then starts wondering about the topic, and I think for me, she effectively gets us in a very artistic way to think about these topics. You know, I share with you, I found the animator to be, it's a little more, you know, hit you over the head, and animation art is not as interesting to me, but I find what he's doing is clever, just less, a little less compelling. And I found the first artist, some of her, I liked her sculptures the best. Her fashion was interesting, but the idea, she gets you thinking pretty well on that sort of idea of the garbage she's finding. But
Yeah,
those are those three artists. I do want to end by telling you about the project that I hope that I've been working on, but let me take a moment and see if anyone wants to react to what I've just shared with you, these different artists, things that maybe I spoke too much and shared what I liked about them, but what was effective to you, maybe what wasn't as effective. Do you see this as helpful? Do you think it actually works? Does the activism work in your mind? Anyone want to speak into or share a comment or question?
Joel, I think part of it is trying to figure out what comes first, the activist or the artist, and what's the intersection? What drives one to either be an activist but looking for a way to communicate, versus an artist who's looking for a form or looking for a sense of purpose that takes his or her art to the next level. So where is that intersection? To me, it's very intriguing thinking about that whole process, because someone might not be a very good activist or might not be a very good artist, but together might be extremely successful and gratifying, maybe even more important than being successful.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I'm going to come back to that one in a minute, because I think that plays into the project I'm working on. I know for me personally, you know, when I think about artist communication, I can look at my now decades of making art, and I feel, in all humility, I can say, I think I've got more to communicate now as I've gotten older. And early on, really my purpose was just to sort of be whimsical. And then I stumbled upon some meaning here and there, and it grew and grew. And now the majority of my work has some pretty distinct purpose to it. And some of it falls into that activist category, but I find whenever I can be so much more direct with what I'm trying to create for, it's more gratifying to me, because it feels more purposeful. You know, I think we all long for purpose. So I think that's an interesting question, though, the sort of what comes first, and and the evolution of those sorts of things. Some of the in that Banksy documentary, they dance around some of those ideas too, of what how street art evolved, and how it evolved from tagging buildings to art, and where does it cross that line?
Right.
Started crossing some lines, and some of it, I think, gets wrapped up in that idea of purpose.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Anyone else?
I think the art really brings the message home, Joel, in a way that perhaps print can't do. You know, you can read about the tons of plastic that are accumulating in the ocean, but seeing it illustrated, I think, really has an impact.
Yeah.
And that's helpful.
Yeah, I like to think of art in a lot of situations as giving people a hook to hang an idea on. So for instance, I was an artist in residence at a church in Flint a couple of years ago. And once a month I would go and I would paint throughout the service. I would have coordinated with whoever was preaching that day and create art in conjunction with their ideas. Sometimes we would interact, sometimes I would just paint. And what was really gratifying to me to find out, literally months later, I would hear people could recall the specifics of that sermon because they thought about the painting. And what I would do is I would finish that painting, and they have those paintings all around that church now, but they could look at the painting and remember all the points of the sermon, which, how often can we do that? And so I love that. I loved hearing that. And I do think art can give us these hooks to hang things on. That's great.
A picture's worth 1,000 words.
Yeah.
And I think Marina Dubois, her art just screams at me as far as what the message she's trying to convey. I think that's excellent. With Zaria Forman, I think it needs a message along with it. I'm amazed at her art. That's what's drawing me to it. Not that she's trying to convey a message.
Yeah, you need a little more context with her, don't you? Where Marina, you absolutely know the point, and it's interesting to look at. I think she's a good artist. And so, boy, I guess when I think about the three artists I shared, I would say the animator is the most just sort of in your face, over the head. Not sure if I like the aesthetics. Zaria, I love the aesthetics, but maybe you need context, and maybe Marina really bridges the two. That it's aesthetically interesting, and it's like you have to be not very smart to not get the point.
Yes.
Yeah.
I like
that. Thanks for that insight.
Could you say the name of the author of the book about liturgy as a way of life?
Oh yeah, Bruce Ellis Benson.
Thank
you. Liturgy as a Way of Life. It's part of the Church and Postmodern Culture series from Baker Academic that James K.A. Smith is the series editor. Anybody else?
Joel, it must be a real challenge as an activist artist to find a forum, through which your message can be seen and considered by people.
Yeah, I will say that most of the work that I've done that falls into that category is work that I've done for free, or really, which means I lose money on. The big activist mural projects, or for instance, I did a art interaction piece for March for Our Lives. So after the awful slaughter in Florida, at the school in Florida a couple of years ago, and they had these March for Our Lives rallies, I went to Lansing for the big rally there, and I was coordinating with the young people organizing that, and I brought a young woman who was 16 at the time, Ava Fuentes. I don't know if you know the Fuentes family. Karen's a teacher for Holland Language Academy, and anyway, Ava was in my high school Sunday school class, and she was passionate about this, and so I brought her along, and I let her mainly do the speaking. I just gave an introduction and basically said, for my estimation, old white guys are goofing things up these days. Let me get out of the way. And Ava gave this almost spoken word poetry thing about how it can't just be one person. One needs to lead to two, needs to multiply. And it grew to this. I mean, it was awesome to watch her. Meanwhile, I had painted a very large painting of a AR-15 or whatever the assault weapon was that was used there. And at the end of her, and I had on an easel there, and at the end of her talk, Ava went over and painted her name on it. And then we moved the painting to the base of the steps there on the Capitol, and people could come and paint their name on it too. And in the course of the event, the gun was wiped out and it turned into this beautiful abstract graffiti-ish, but all the painting, it was like almost like waves of color because the way people had painted their names, and I had lots of different colors available. So it wasn't a big muddy mess. It was this really beautiful sort of abstract piece by the end. I was really proud of that activism that day. You know, cost me several $100s, right? So most of the time I lose money when I do these sorts of things. I had one exception. I did a painting. I was concerned in 2016 by some rhetoric going on in politics. I created this large painting, and I didn't think I'd ever sell it. I had a friend come along and pay me proper money for it, basically to say, I want you to keep doing this kind of work. So you know, it is this funny thing though. It's like, where's the audience? How do you fund it? How do you keep it going? So yeah.
Thanks.
Anybody else? Well, let me share with you the project I'm working on briefly, and then I think I'll probably have to do a half talk like whenever I am done with this project, or maybe I'll just invite you to the showing. But let me find my notes. So when I was first asked to do this, I had started on this idea of biodiversity. I wanted to do a show on that. I had done that coral reef painting, and I wanted to do more. I am the type of person who gets an idea every day. And I think my little bit of growing and wisdom has been to know to not act on those ideas right away, because I'll probably have the next idea tomorrow and have forgotten about the idea I had today. But the wisdom has come in knowing when an idea keeps resurfacing, if I can't shake it, I now believe those are the projects I should do. And a project I just can't shake is this idea of a painting about, or a series of paintings about biodiversity. That is how we're losing so much of our wildlife. So I actually reached out. I knew I needed to learn more. And Kim Mendels from HASP, her daughter Maddie was doing environmental studies. And so she was my first contact. And Maddie pointed me to a thing called the Red List. The Red List is a endangered species catalog. It's sort of the source that all the other sources go to. It's being cataloged by all these scientists regionally, and it has real specificity to it, where it tells you, it has a whole range of what's endangered on down. They've got all these different categories of nearly extinct down to, you know, we should keep our eye on this. Those are my terms, not theirs. And then it speaks to regions and the specific causes within that region of what they're doing. It's this wealth of information. And so I started, that was my starting point. So it's like, now I knew what's getting endangered and sort of the whys. But then I realized I need to know a lot more. So here's the two things I've done since then, other than I've been writing ideas. I write my ideas first. I don't have any artwork to share with you yet. But the first thing I realized is I needed more expert help. This is an area I'm passionate about, but I'm still not educated enough in it. So I've been reaching out to different experts. I've met with a couple of Hope College professors, at a safe distance, That's been one of the tricks right now. And I've been doing some research. Here's an example. One of the paintings I plan to do, one of the causes of the destruction of creatures is poaching. So I'm not just doing climate change, I'm doing a wide range of things. So I happen to love elephants, and elephant poaching is just crushing when you learn about it. And I had heard a fact that there's an elephant being poached once every 15 minutes. And I said that to somebody recently, and they're like, no, that seems like too much. Because you sort of add that up, and it's nearly 100 elephants a day. And it's like, that can't be possible. But you do a little more research, and you find out indeed that's true. And so I want to pin down the exact number. So this is where the research comes in. And one of the paintings I'll be doing for this show is just called 24 Hours, or it'll be called A Day in the Life of the Elephant. And it'll just be a big, beautiful painting of elephants. And there's going to be one elephant for every one poached that day. Trying to bridge that gap of, it'll be a lovely painting, it'll be fun, it'll be interesting, and then it'll be devastating when you, when you find out the context around it. It's sort of like the glacier pastel artist, though it'll need a little context to it. But this is that sort of funny thing that you walk in, sort of the idea of doing activism. It's like if I did nearly 100 slaughtered elephants with their tusks cut off, where's that painting going to go? So trying to walk that line of like a painting someone might love to display, might be engaging, but not off-putting. So the first thing I realized is I need more expert help. So I've been seeking that out. And the second thing I did is I spent more and more time on the red list, is I learned I actually needed permission from the red list to use it in certain ways. There's all this legal jargon of how you can use it. So I emailed them, and because I'm not a great researcher, I didn't have full context for where the red list was. And this is one of the benefits of being a guy like me that just sort of I just do things that follow the trail. And turns out the red list is actually in Cambridge in England. And it's if you ever watch any of David Attenborough's specials about nature, it's actually the David Attenborough something at Cambridge. And so he's tied into that, or his foundation. And so I started corresponding with them. And what's been lovely is I've got a nice email correspondence going with them. They know what I'm up to. And my hope now has grown for this project, and that I hope that it'll ultimately be shown in several places, and one of them would be over there. So I'm having really good communications with them about the ways that I need to cite them properly. I need to cite them properly, and what I need to do to make it just to use the information. Which it turns out it's not going to be hard. But when you're reading through a thing and you see a bunch of legalese, I'm like, I don't want to paint a whole art show and cite the red list and get sued. But so instead, just by pursuing that thread, it's looking like I have some opportunities for partnership there. But I've got my ideas pretty far along. I need some more expert help in this project, and then I'll hopefully start painting this coming year. Some of it's going to be based on just figuring out, back to Tom's point, it's like how do you do this as an artist? And the one nice thing about this one is it's animals, and I've sold animal paintings for years and years and years. So I actually think this has pragmatic viability that way, but it's a matter of freeing up the time to create the work to do it. So so my hope for today was to show you a whole bunch of the new artwork. Instead we had this is a more foundational class for showing you where we're heading next. So that's what I'm up to, and I hope that I'll have more. Hopefully I'll have more to share soon. Sorry, I was just looking over at a chat. is quite finished. Okay.
Eye on that. You've got, you're seeing that?
Yeah, the chat. Oh. We'll get there soon.
Actually,
Okay.
I've got one. I've got a couple that just came to me.
Yeah, great.
You can create, well, did you answer the first one? About 4 to 5 years ago, I met a local young lady who was in.
I think that one's, I think she's still she's still writing.
Okay. You can create a Banksy shredder to shred pictures of elephants on the pace of their actual destruction.
Oh, there's one, you know, so interestingly, one of the paintings piece of work I want to do is paper tiger. You know, the paper tiger is I have to look at my notes of how I'm going to twist that, but a paper tiger is a false thing we hold up. And I've got a whole wordplay I'm going to do with paper tiger that will have something to do with shredding. So, but that's great. Great minds think alike, whoever sent that idea.
Okay, and then it's actually Suzanne Harrington, and my trick yesterday, Suzanne, didn't work. You're at home_front. So about 4 to 5 years ago, I met a local young lady who was in studies to go into ministry. She had a calling to go to Africa, which she has done to spread God's word. So more of a statement.
Yeah. We got just a few minutes left. I guess I had more to talk about today. I thought this was going to be a shorter presentation, but I enjoyed, the thing I like about HASC groups is that you are interactive. So does anyone else have thoughts, questions? Is anyone a retired environmentalist who would like to be my researcher? I'm getting a couple messages from folks. I'll just say to Paul, you got it. Or that's probably, yeah. Okay, anyone?
Shy group today.
Let me just say that if anyone does want to follow up or have thoughts or input or want to keep up with me, all of my things can be traced at Joel Schoon Tanis Art. So my website is joelschoontanisart.com. You can link to the Joel Schoon Tanis gallery from there. That's sort of where you can see work for sale. I'm also represented by the Armstrong de Graaf Gallery in Saugatuck. And then I do have a Facebook page that I don't attend to because I've got disillusioned by Facebook. And even though Instagram is owned by Facebook, I do like Instagram. So if you really want to see what I'm working on sort of constantly, if you're an Instagram person, Joel Schoon Tanis Art. And all I post on there are things I'm painting, things I've painted, and an occasional inspiration if I see something by another artist, but I don't post pictures of what I'm having for dinner or whatever else people post on social media. It's strictly an art page. So, oh, and Susan just put that by the link there. So if you want to poke around there, I'm sure there are outdated pieces to it, but I'm always working to update some of those things. But Instagram's probably the easiest spot to see things. And at one point I had an Instagram link on my website, which may or may not be there because I never visit my own website.
Well, I suppose we can wrap the class early unless anyone is willing to unmute themselves and make a comment.
Susan, I've got a 7 on my chat. Are we missing some questions?
I've been getting some private messages from people.
Oh, maybe that's what it is then.
I think it might be, and I don't even see, you're seeing something I don't normally see, which is a number of chat questions, or like how many there are. I can see the ones to everyone and then the ones that are sent to me privately. But Joel, it sounds like you've got it covered.
Yeah, I'm trying to quickly. Oh, I've got someone talking about my studio, and I will say this: once it's safe to do so, feel free to pop in. Probably right now is not the best time. Let's not be a super spreader event, but you know, it's just me here these days. I'm in this the Centennial Park building or the Temple building, Suite 150, and you'll know it's all residential here except the first floor is commercial, and you'll know me when you walk down the hall and you see my artwork in the window. So it's not hard to find. But you're welcome to come see what I'm working on when it's not a pandemic.
I have trouble communicating over the vocally because there's interference, but I did note that my friend that went to Africa and used her time to help people there, she encouraged them to paint, and so she'd set up painting and then express themselves in artwork.
Yeah, nice. So if you didn't hear this, I also got this in writing that this friend works in Africa and helps folks express their feelings through painting, that it becomes a sort of a cathartic thing, I think, an expressive thing.
And Jane pointed out that she's always been intrigued by your work and personality. Thank you for today's presentation. I think that echoes what many of us feel about just all the beautiful work that you presented throughout our community and the world, really. And then the way in which you present it and really personalize it for us is so appreciated for bringing this to have. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you.
Joel.
Thank you, Joel, for opening our eyes both to the art and to the ideas that go with it.
Thank you. I appreciate it, and I'm answering some people's questions right now. So let's not close the Susan. Don't close the link right away.
I won't. I see
I'll
that.
finish answering anyone's questions in chat for a few more minutes, and but if you're done chatting with me, I won't be offended if you leave the meeting right now, because you'll just be looking at me looking down at my keyboard. Thanks, everybody. Stay safe and have a great day.
What is your Instagram link? I'll type it in the chat.
Yeah, the handle is joel.schoon.tanis.art. So all my things.
Joel.schoon.tanis.art.
Yeah.
See the question still up. Did I see one?